I first got involved in politics, it's about 45 years ago now. And I was involved at the local level, enjoyed it very much as a councillor and then a mayor of Surrey. And after that I became involved provincially. And I served in 3 ministries as Minister of Social Services, Municipal Affairs and Education, and then became the Premier. I look back and I realized that when I first became involved in politics, there was an indemnity, there were benefits, but it was reasonable. It was more than what the chimney sweeper got, but it was less than an engineer, lawyer, or an accountant. Today, that's not so anymore. So we were there because we had a commitment to the people and to wanting to help the people. And you didn't get a pension unless you served X number of years, and then you had to contribute. All of that changed over the years. Now the pay is big time. The benefits are tremendous. The pensions are big, and they get them very quickly. So people are getting elected, not so much because they want to serve the people anymore. It's oftentimes the pay, the benefits, the pension. And when that happens, that becomes the important thing. It becomes a self-serving thing, and they're no longer there for the people. In 1986, a world-class city greets the world. But Vancouver's success will not be measured during the few months of Expo or in buildings left behind. Our success will be in the permanent jobs we create and the lasting impressions we share with our visitors. I think the people are being left out of the process. Government has lost complete contact with the people. It's a mess. And the average person out there, if you ask them, do you really trust the government? They'll say no. A whole lot of them, a large percentage. Whether it's here or Ontario or elsewhere in Canada, I think a lot of people have lost their trust in government, which is really sad, because the government is supposed to be there to represent the people. They're elected to do things on our behalf and to communicate with us. That's all gone. So we've seen the cost of government increase enormously. And we've reached a point where really the bureaucracy and the elite are in charge. And the politicians are simply oftentimes a tool for the elite and the bureaucrats. So as a result of that, we saw the introduction of the HST by Gordon Campbell, the then Premier, and he simply one day announced it and said, we're going to have HST. We've reached an agreement with the federal government. We're going to have HST, value added tax, in this province. And I sat and watched television when the announcement was made, and I said, this is crazy. Every premier, every finance minister for years fought against that because they said it was wrong for the people. It penalized the guy, the gal that packs the lunch bucket and goes to work every day, and the benefit flows to the big corporations. All business had a benefit, including myself, but most of it went to the big corporations. I said, this is wrong. That's why we fought it. So I agreed to take on the lead to fight the HST. And I had a few people join me. We had a small board. This was the war room. We met here quite regularly and developed a strategy. Everybody said it can't be done. The legislation, which was introduced by myself or my government at the time, the legislation for initiative and referendum, but the rules were written by the NDP, and I don't think the NDP had as much a hand in it as the bureaucrats again, and they didn't want controls. They didn't want, for the people to have a say in the process is very awkward for politicians and bureaucrats. So they wrote the rules thinking it will never work anyway, so we're safe with this. We fooled them, it worked. So we were successful in that. And I see it, the HST and the smart meters, as a part of globalization. It's all moving towards global government. And the worst government is the government furthest away. starts at the top. The worst government is the federal government because you can't talk to them. You can't get through the door. You can't talk to anybody. The next worst government is the provincial government. You can't get to them. You can't get through the door. And if a premier or a minister becomes too available to the people, the bureaucracy will cut them off and somehow get rid of them. There's ways to handle that. The best government is local government. But the local government gets the least amount of money. The most money goes to the federal government, then the provincial government, and the local government gets the least amount. So it should be reversed. However, they're now trying to move towards global government. So that's the next worry, and that's where I see this all fitting in. So the next thing that came on my plate was smart meters. I had a meeting in this room with people that were wanting to fight smart meters. And I said, well, you can't have a petition because the rules were written that you can only have a petition. The democratic process is only allowed to work once every 3 years. So we couldn't have a petition. But anyway, they fought it. I fought it. I have a notice on my analog meter saying, don't install a smart meter, hands off, I don't want you here. And I locked the door. So I still have my analog meter. Now the government's come back and said, you keep your analog meter, but we're going to charge you extra every month for having it, which is crazy. But the smart meters were introduced exactly the same way. The government came out and said, we've committed $1 billion to install smart meters in every home in the province. And I said, well, you know, it's crazy. They don't have enough money for autism. They don't have enough money for health care. They don't have enough money for handicap. They don't have enough money for all things, but suddenly they can find $1 billion on smart meters when the analog meters work fine. What's happening here? So with a little research, I found out that really the smart meters allows them to spy on people. They can put little chips, and they will have. Every appliance we buy in future will have a little chip that communicates with the smart meter, and some smart guy with a computer in Vancouver will figure out exactly what I'm doing from day to day, when I'm here, when I'm gone, what time I come back, what time I go, when I eat, the whole bit. It'll all be available to them if they want to use it. They say, we don't want to use it. We're not going to use it for that. But how do we know?
Is that literally this Big Brother type of Orwellian world?
Yeah, it was all foretold. It was supposed to happen much earlier, but it's been foretold. I think in part too, sports has become the biggest religion in Canada. The hockey game is probably the biggest religion going. So a hockey game and a bottle of beer is more important than chemtrails or smart meters or HSD and all of those things, which is sad. That's going to change one day, but not until things get very bad. People should not follow what it is they're necessarily being told by big media. The mainstream media is terrible. Mainstream media used to be pretty good. When I was there, I couldn't blow my nose without there being a big controversy. But that's all gone away. The mainstream media is now kowtowing to various elite groups as well, and they're all owned by very few people anyway. So the mainstream media hasn't been reporting on this. They've been ignoring the issue. I don't think they can ignore local politicians once they begin to speak out.
Now, you mentioned as part of these protests and rallies that people are interested in is the decriminalization of marijuana. And right now, Justin Trudeau is beginning to kind of lean towards this idea of possibly legalizing marijuana. I'm wondering what are your views on the differences between legalization versus decriminalization?
Well, I think marijuana is so commonplace right now in North America. Well, not just North America, probably most of the Western world. I think it's so commonplace that to ignore it with laws and not do something, whatever it is, I don't know, but not to simply ignore it is not the answer. It's crazy that somebody caught with a marijuana cigarette should end up being a criminal, so they can't go across the border, or all sorts of other things that result from that. It's crazy. So there's changes to be made, but perhaps not all at once. perhaps not all at once. That may be the best way to go.
Well, I do know it's a billion-dollar industry here, particular in BC. Colorado State and Washington recently, took these moves to legalize, decriminalize. Why do you think BC, especially with sharing borders there, are not kind of following suit and starting to?
Well, of course, they're having a vote in BC. They're doing an initiative petition right now, which could lead to a referendum vote. And the people that are organizing it say there's lots of support. I don't think it's quite as simple as HST issue wasn't simple, but 705,000 people signed the petition. I don't know if it would be that easy with decriminalizing marijuana. It might be a lot more difficult. So they're having quite a battle on their hands. But decriminalizing marijuana is not really a provincial issue. It's a federal issue. So there's problems with it, but okay, the people that are pushing for it, I give them full marks. They're fighting for it. No problem. I'm okay with that. Especially if they're having a referendum and the majority say it's okay, then who are people in government to go against it?
Mm-hmm. Are you hopeful that we'll see a change in the right direction in that regard?
Well, the right direction, I think the criminalization of marijuana is criminal in itself, I'm sorry. It's stupid to put a criminal record on somebody for that reason. Both Campbell and McGuinty had an agenda, and they were both, and Mr. Harper, our Prime Minister as well, are people that are inclined to support globalization. Right. So there was a common thread. They're all interested in globalization. Our Premier, Mr. Campbell, even went to a secret Bilderberger conference at taxpayers' expense in Spain. And nothing should be secret. And especially if the taxpayers are paying for it, it shouldn't be secret. But that's what's happening. Right. That's the way they're heading. And I guess the reason is that if they can get everybody hooked on beer and hockey, then they're easy to handle and manipulate.
Right. Last question.
And I like a good hockey game, and I don't even mind a bottle of beer. But it's when that becomes more important than the issues, we've got problems.
I once questioned Paul Martin about his Bilderberg attendance, and his response to that, when I asked him why he went, he said, just because I go to a Maple Leafs game doesn't mean I'm a Maple Leafs fan. And I think he had that answer prepared, because just trying to brush off Bilderberg. I questioned former Premier of Ontario about his Bilderberg attendance as well. Now we have Alison Redford being a member of Bilderberg.
Bilderberg started where I was born. As a matter of fact, about 10 miles or less from my home in Holland. That's where it started, the whole Bilderberg thing. But it's a secret society dealing with public issues and influencing the direction of public affairs. And when a group meets to influence direction of public affairs, and it's done in secrecy, it's criminal. They're the ones that should go to jail. We live in an age now where with computers, there's no reason for a bunch of people to meet secretly and make decisions in Victoria. They can get the pulse of the people very quickly. And I learned very early on that you may not always agree with the general population when you propose something and they oppose it, but they're always right. They're never wrong.
In terms of groups like Bilderberg who are pushing for more globalization and bringing the world together on kind of the bigger picture in regards to globalization, what do you think the end game is? What is the goal? What are these guys trying to do?
The end game, and this will sound like I'm being a conspiracy theorist, I'm not, but the end game, in my mind, is control. Everything's about control. If you follow the money, follow politics, you'll find it's all about control. If we don't stop it, we're going to end up, at least my children's children, perhaps, it may not happen right away, but given 25, 30, 40 years, we're going to end up with everything being controlled. There's nothing we can do as an individual or as a family without the government having a hand in it. It's all about control.